don't know if you can tell by my outfit, but I'm not from around here. I'm from Michigan, and I don't have a wardrobe that fully is compatible with the Georgian heat, but God bless whoever invented air conditioning. Just feeling all right in here. My name is Caleb. These are my friends Nick and Zach, and not actually slightly less attractive clones of myself. We are three separate people. We are also not related, but we run a ministry online called Blackbar that Justin mentioned, and the whole idea of the ministry is a digital media ministry, and it's dedicated to helping digital media people and churches who are desperate for digital media, and sort of helping them understand how to use media, how to use tech, how to use marketing to reach the world around them. We got started in January of 2020, which, as you might imagine, is a relatively timely moment to get started in that industry. We were very busy very quickly leading into the beginning of the pandemic. We spent a lot of time with a lot of churches creating educational content on YouTube and on our podcast about how to get online very quickly. And that was very necessary at the time. And we helped a lot of churches get online very quickly. Thousands of churches get online very quickly. We're very proud of that work, and we're excited to see what God's done with it. But as much as we are very excited about what's gone done with so many churches moving online as fast as they have, we really feel like we've barely scratched the surface of what's possible with digital ministry and digital evangelism as a whole. And we want to talk today about that potential and really see, like, if our goal is to find new people to meet the lost online, how can we do that effectively, right? So let's talk about a little bit of that potential that we have online. I like talking about YouTube specifically, not only because I use YouTube all the time, every single day, but because I have a YouTube account, and I guarantee all of you have YouTube accounts, and I'm pretty sure most of your kids have YouTube accounts, and I'm pretty sure most of your grandparents have YouTube accounts. It's universal, and that's not entirely just a saying. YouTube reports to having 1.7 billion unique monthly users every single month. Think like billion with the B, right? Just to give you some context, that is about the same as the population of North America and South America and Europe combined, right? That's ridiculous. If you're familiar with the 1040 window, it's about a little over half the population of that. The 1040 window is a span of area across Africa and across Asia with a little over 3 billion unreached people, right? When we talk about groups of people, nations of people, this time online, these are the kind of opportunities that our faith forefathers would have dreamed about, right? So many people in one place, and really a click away in a lot of instances. Let's talk about just America though, right? That's where we are, that's what we understand. Americans on average, and you might have heard this stat before, spend about 5 hours a day on the internet. That's a lot of time on the internet. 25% of those Americans self-report to spending over 10 hours a day on the internet. And I will self-report to absolutely being in that second category.
Amen.
And those that are online are actually probably spending most of that
absolutely.
at this conference. Yeah.
Right? If we talk about millennials in America, getting even more specific, right? Millennials report to having 11 friends on average that are entirely online, right? That they have never met in person in any capacity. And 25% of millennials in America report that all of the new friends they make these days are on the internet, right? That's how they're making new connections. That's how they're making new friends. So when I look at these stats, especially some of those last few, it makes me think of a couple things. Number one, obviously, the internet is growing. More people are using it. And obviously, people are interested. Their hunger for content, for more stuff on the internet is growing. But also with those last few stats, our hunger for relationships online are growing. People are looking for a place to connect on the internet. They're looking for a place to belong on the internet. They're looking for relationships. And if I have to be honest, if we have to be honest, I really think that the church has done, as a whole, a relatively lackluster job of building the spaces that people want to connect to, that people want to belong to. And I think there's probably a billion reasons of why that is the case. But just for one thing, I think that perhaps it's because we haven't necessarily made them a priority, right? So just for a show of hands, how many here at their church are involved in media in some capacity. What is their main hat they wear or one of a dozen hats they wear every day? Awesome, great, most of you, wonderful. So I want you to think about all of the work that you do on a weekly basis, right? Specifically media related. I want you to break up that work into two different categories. The first category is work that is primarily for people who attend your church already, right? So this is gonna be possibly video announcements, possibly your bulletin, event promos, some general like verses on social media, stuff like that, right? And then let's talk about the second category, which is primarily for people who don't attend your church, right? More evangelistic focused stuff. This might be testimonies that we're posting online, like billboards if you're into that kind of thing, that kind of thing. And think about these two categories and how much time you spend on either one. In my experience working at a church and working with a lot of churches, the overwhelming majority of our time is spent in category one, right? And to a certain extent, of course, we have to feed the flock. We have to continue to reach our own congregation. They do need to be a priority. But when we talk about potential, right? When we talk about 1.7 billion people, and when we talk about how powerful these tools are, these tools that companies around the world are using to make millions of dollars every day, and if we could figure out how to use those tools and reach people on the internet, share the gospel with them, we could see revival online in a way that we have never seen before, right? So today we're gonna talk a little bit about that potential. We're gonna talk about how to actually reach people online. And specifically, we're gonna talk about the model of church online that we've sort of ended up with, that we've sort of defaulted to right now, and some of the issues that have led to this point. We're gonna talk specifically on how we've named our session today, which is maybe slightly controversial. I am a marketing guy, so I do wanna get your attention, right? How we're accidentally killing the online church. How do you accidentally kill a plant? You don't water it, right? How do you accidentally kill an online church? You don't give it what it needs to grow, what it needs to find new people, impact new people, share the gospel with new people. So we're gonna talk about the model of church of where we ended up with right now, how we can sort of move in a new direction, and some really exciting specific ways about how we can reach some people online. And Zach is gonna start.
Don't mind us, we're gonna do a little bit of musical chairs today, shuffling around, keeping us on our toes, and you on your toes as well. So as Caleb said, I'm Zach, and I'm the outgoing clone. Today we don't look as similar, because yesterday we had hats on, and it was like, I've just come to realize that most media folks are just like, lots to love, beards, hats, it's great, glasses. But regardless, I'm gonna go ahead and take us into the first of these problems that Caleb discussed, and that's the megachurch problem. So at Blackbar, we've quantified basically a spectrum of digital media strategies. So it's gonna come up on the wall here behind me. I don't mean to stand right in front. I think I'm gonna get in the way of someone here. But to the right, we have the traditionalists. To the center, we have the adapters. And then to the far left, we have the innovators, or the pioneers. Generally speaking, the traditionalists tend to reject or intentionally pull away or not leverage digital media in their churches. The pioneers, on the opposite side, tend to be the ones that most embrace and experiment with new digital media in their churches and ministries. And then the adapters tend to take the middling route, in which they play it a little bit more safe, and they systemically implement the successes of the pioneers without incurring all the risk of being first, right? Well, I want you to hear that none of these strategies are inherently wrong, but what this does, whenever we look at our own ministries, whenever we decide which of these categories our ministries most align with, we start to understand the mindset that our own organization has toward digital media. So megachurches, which the Hartford Institute for Religion Research defines as churches with 2,000 or more in regular weekend attendance, are the organizations that most normally sit to the innovators camp, right? That's not to say other smaller communities, content creators, ministries can't be a pioneer, but rather the resources, the mission, the scope of these larger churches allow them to invest into newer trends and invest into innovations because they have the capacity and the intentionality to do so. They can handle the risk that's required to be a pioneer. While every ministry has a localized community, each of us has communities that we are targeting, people around us that we are focusing on. Oftentimes, megachurches will compound their focus into a national and sometimes even a global audience, right? We can look at Hillsong Church, for example. According to their website, they have 30 locations in 30 countries on 6 continents with a global weekend of attendance of around 150,000 people. 150,000, like that's a ridiculous amount for a weekend service. So what does that do for the rest of us who are watching different churches, mega churches, succeed in the digital space? I mean, I don't know about you guys, but one of the first things I do is I compare what I'm doing to their success, which isn't the most fair thing for us to do. Inevitably, we are going to deal with this struggle of what is the other church doing, right? That's oftentimes the first thing that we will ask as Blackbar. We help churches, and one of the first things that a lot of churches ask, even the churches that we've been employed at, the first starting question when we want to innovate and we want to pioneer is, what are other churches doing, right?
All the time.
So, yep. What was that, Nick?
All the time.
Yeah. Nick's my hype man over there. Thank you, Nick. I appreciate it. So while that's not the worst question to ask, it does start to inform a little bit about where our expectations and our standards are being set for our own ministries. So we oftentimes will observe mega churches and try to emulate their success with a fraction of their budget, a fraction of their teams, and a fraction of their conviction to digital ministry. We crave the elevation church level production with a $50 camera in the back of our room. And we want transformation church like social media and when we can barely post on Facebook once or twice a month, right? Then, when we emulate these churches, it's very easy for us to mistake their audience, their intentionally chosen, marketed audience, as our audience. In general, megachurches develop an intentional strategy that communicates what kind of church they are to those that already speak the language of the church. While I don't want to glance over the fact that churches, especially megachurches, have very effective evangelistic strategies targeted toward non-church audiences, you and I are going to be drawn to emulate the marketing that's made intentionally for us. So in a way, their marketing's effective, right? But not in the way you and I need it to be. See, we have to recognize that other churches' methods were not made to communicate and engage with our audiences. Going back to our example from before, Hillsong Church, their focused media teams, globally focused media teams, are not creating content for the people that are in our own backyards, right? So the question then is, how do we move from emulation to innovation? It's important for us to recognize that churches are, generally speaking, infamously behind the curve of church digital trends, right? Referencing the digital church strategies from before, we've observed that a majority of churches sit pretty squarely in the adapters camp. And while this is a spectrum and we should never, envision ourselves being static in one spot, generally speaking, churches sit square in the middle. Regardless of whether they lean more technology adverse or whether they dip their toes into a little bit of the risk of pioneering and innovating, most actively, the ministries that are pioneering and innovating are falling into the smallest camp. So this may be a hard pill to swallow, but some of the most consistently successful and effective digital creators, communities, pioneers are outside of the church world. Streamers, digital community leaders, content creators, these folks study their platform, invest time, energy, and resources into the craft to be the best, right? And they make their decisions because it will inevitably most benefit their online audience first. They know who their audience is and they're going to target them. So I want to throw a few practical examples of like secular ministries that maybe are doing a pretty good job right now. So the first, by way of long form content, we have what's called Critical Role. So I don't know if we have, I don't know how, if I'm allowed to say Dungeons and Dragons, because it depends on the person. But Critical Role is basically a show about professional voice actors playing an RPG game for 3 to 4 hours every single Thursday. Like, this is long-form content, 3 to 4 hours of content, and over 250,000 people are tuning in for the entirety of that experience. They're engaging in the chat, they're connecting with each other, they're forming community, there's even merchandise, and there's different experiences. You have people that are creating art because this is so effective. And even after the account, their media is available on demand, and you'll see that their content easily reaches 1 million views. So the question for us is, we can't even get people to tune in for our hour-long service, much less 3 to 4 hours. So what can we learn from someone like Critical Role about their engagement and storytelling that can be effective for our own ministries? Another example is My Healthy Gamer, which is a Twitch streamer. He basically hosts live therapy sessions on his Twitch channel. He takes submissions from his viewers. He takes submissions from places like Reddit, in which he just breaks down the issue, he processes it, and invites people to just listen in. His channel has almost 1 million subscribers of people that are seeking holistic advice from a total stranger, They've never met this man, but yet they're seeking advice about the mental health struggles that they're going through consistently from him. The church at large doesn't really have any greatly accessible programs for people struggling with mental health. But what if we were to adopt this kind of method to reach people online in a capacity that we may never be able to otherwise? And then finally, we have something like Dude Perfect. I don't know how many people have kids here, but you've probably heard of Dude Perfect because of them. They're an American sports comedy group that create viral content for all ages, centered around sports and trick shots and just good, clean fun. They, since their inception, have created 3 YouTube channels with over 57 million subscribers. Last I checked, their TikTok was at 16 million. Imagine if we could take that kind of engagement and connection and accessibility and take it back to our student ministries and our youth ministries. See, these creators have accepted that people live very full lives online, right? We work, we navigate finances, we shop, we date, we get jobs, we get fired from jobs, we form connections with friends and families. During the pandemic, we used Zoom meetings to stay connected to the people that were far away from us. We form connections, and the people, these creators, understand the importance of taking the digital space seriously. See, these creators have a lot that we can learn from. We have the opportunity and the ability to translate their successes into our ministries. So while it's important to note, we should never, ever pursue virality over authenticity. That's not what the church is about. The church is not about virality. We do, however, need to be striving to engage with our audience in a way that most resonates with them. So digital connection is not just about being present, it's also about being purposeful, intentional, and authentic. And just like, we all know missionaries will learn the language, the cultures, the traditions, the unique needs of the places that they're going to, and so too should we be taking that same mindset into the digital spaces that we are involved in. The Great Commission is too important for us to settle with what we've always done, so we have to be willing and okay to go where we haven't been, even if we're the ones to pioneer the way.
Save a seat for you, Zach.
I'm gonna high five because, shuffle out. Let's go.
Tag me in. Hey there, I'm Nick Mayo. If you're having trouble differentiating me from the other two, just remember I'm the shorter of the 3. I'm actually regular height. They're just very tall.
That is true. The most short person thing you can possibly.
So another thing that's brought us to where we are today is something we're calling the feedback loop. Now, this is specific for social media. The feedback loop happens when essentially our congregates interact with our posts online and other individuals don't. When someone, say like your sister Ethel, who really loves quilting, and your quilting ministry, sees your post for a quilting retreat coming up and she gives it a like, the Facebook is going to see that and continue to put those posts in front of Sister Ethel. The problem is that whenever someone doesn't see it, say her rebellious grandson, Kyle, sees it, not interested, scrolls right by, Facebook remembers that. And enough of these instances, what happens is that we get into the feedback loop, because when someone scrolls past your posts and Facebook remembers that, it will show less of your content to that individual over time. Enough of that, and they'll probably never see any of your content. So why is this a problem? Well, the way social media works is that they have a very free platform for a lot of us. And the way that social media makes money is they sell you advertisements. So when Instagram sees that you have a post about your Easter service and it's trying to see who they want to send it to, it's not going to send it to someone who classifies himself as non-religious. It doesn't make any sense from the platform to do that because they're not going to make money from that. In the same way that it wouldn't advertise snowblowers here in Georgia. Trust me, I lived here for 10 years in Athens before I moved to Michigan. I've seen our winters here and I've seen winters there. They are vastly different. The unfortunate truth is that the algorithm, the holy algorithm, doesn't reward outreach. We're literally preaching to the choir. Now, please understand that doesn't mean you shouldn't interact with your congregations online. That's definitely something we should be doing. But if we're trying to see the digital space as a missions field, that means we need to be doing more. So How do we exit the feedback loop? Well, I'm not sure if Mark McDonald's still here. He might be. There he is. I promise we didn't steal your content, but it's the same thing. Social media is supposed to be social. No one likes to talk to a brick wall. We want to have conversations online. And I know it's really scary sometimes for us to allow those to happen on our pages. What happens if someone comments something and gets really belligerent? What happens if we try to explain ourselves and it's interpreted the wrong way? What happens if there's a really complex topic we're trying to talk about that can't be done in 280 characters or less? But I think what we've done is we've exchanged intimacy for safety. Think about the conversations that you have online. Think about the posts that you interact with. What makes you guys comment? What's something that you would share? I think instead of churches trying to tightly control the conversations we have online, it'd be better if we try to join existing conversations. There's a reason why trends go viral. Are you guys ready for a little bit of participation here? I know this is dated by internet standards, but who here is Team Doors?
Let's go. Team Doors. There's more doors than wheels in the world is the question, right? No. There's more doors.
Who here is Team Doors, or Team Wheels?
You can be wrong.
The correct team.
You can be wrong.
We're gonna have a prayer service later for a deliverance for the spirit of deception. I jest. But I think what I'm trying to illustrate here is that though a lot of us haven't met before the conference, we all had a collective conversation online that we've all been participating in. If our churches are able to participate in these conversations, now we can be a part of people's lives in the online space. When I said also earlier about, we need to engage in conversation, we also need to act differently online as well. There's a reason why corporations that treat their online spaces more as individuals do better. I think of, it's a little spicy, but Wendy's, not the chicken, although it is spicy, but their social media account can be a little bit spicy sometimes, but they tend to be doing really well. If you look at TikTok, there are some of the better brands on there that are getting more engagement don't present their corporation or their product, they have an individual. I think of Duolingo specifically. Their whole thing is an app to help you learn how to speak different languages, but their presence on TikTok is their mascot, doing crazy things. Now, I've heard that, there are arguments against this idea of trying to interact online as an individual or engaging in these conversations because it can seem a little frivolous, and not necessarily kingdom-minded. It doesn't necessarily look the most church thing to do when you're trying to get your staff to participate in a TikTok dance.
But I mean, how many pastors would we like to see do the floss on stage?
Yeah,
Come on.
I can't.
No, don't do it. Don't do it. They don't need to see that.
No one needs to see that. What would it look like if our churches decided to start engaging with our online communities, not just by posting about our events and things online, but actually going into the comments and showing the love of Jesus to people? What would it be like if, when someone posts, man, I've had the roughest day of my life, and your church went in there and said, hey, you know what, we're praying for you, and we care about you. If you need anything, give us a call. Here's a number of our lead pastor. How can we communicate the humor of our congregation and the culture of our communities by saying that exact same thing on a post, except something about hashtag first world problems? I actually did this a week ago where I accidentally got the wrong sushi, and I made a post about it, and we commented as Blackbar, and we actually got some interaction through that. Oh, my phone decided to go in landscape mode. Let's fix that. So unless you're Kevin Costner in the movie Field of Dreams, you can't just build a church and expect people to show up. It takes effort on our part. It takes us trying to create a space where it's safe. And the same thing can be said when we're trying to build the church online. Caleb.
Cool. I have to say, we're generally much more used to talking into like the black void of a camera. And it was my idea to just imagine all of you as little cameras. But now being up here, that is definitely not going to help me at all. That's way scarier. The third thing that we want to talk about today is this tiny little world event. You might have missed it. Happened around March 2020. There was a bit of a worldwide pandemic and then subsequent lockdown of the majority of churches across the world. And in order to survive, most churches jumped online to continue having their services, right? To continue to meet with their communities, to continue the ministry of the church. And obviously that was necessary, right? For survival, to continue making that happen. But I've heard a lot in our industry specifically about how this big transition online, as much as the scenario around it was difficult, was this huge, awesome, positive, glorious thing for digital ministry as a whole, that we jumped 10 to 15 years into the future of church digital media strategies. And while I think, I understand where they're coming from, I think in a way, and specifically the way of a pastoral perception of digital ministry, we've taken a step forward and like 3 or 4 or 10 or 15 steps back, right? There's a reason these days when I am talking to a church, consulting with a church, and I am trying to gather demographic data, I'm trying to gather like the congregation size, without fail, I am given 2 numbers these days, right? And you know exactly what numbers I'm given, right? The pre-COVID numbers, which those don't exist anymore. It's been a couple years, right? And then the post-COVID numbers. Unfortunately, for a variety of reasons that probably deserve its own whole talk, the vast majority of churches shrunk during the pandemic, during the lockdown when we were all forced online. According to Barna, who did a research during the summer of 2020, which, if you remember correctly, was not very far into the pandemic and lockdown, they found that 32% of practicing Christians have stopped attending for the time being, right? That wasn't very far in. I have to imagine that number didn't shrink a couple months later. And we all know that a percentage of those never ended up coming back, right? So the moment that pastors were able to have services back in their building again, of course, we jumped at the bit to be able to do that, right? To stem the bleeding of our congregation and the ministries going on there, right? Excuse me. This left, obviously, a bit of a bad taste in most pastors' mouths when it comes to digital ministry. And then, a couple years later, 3 bozos jump on the stage and tell you that you should put even more energy and more effort into a ministry style and in a ministry strategy that, in some cases, almost killed your church. In some cases, actually did kill your church, right? There's a lot of churches who didn't end up surviving all the way through the pandemic. And to a certain extent, I understand the perspective, absolutely. There's probably something you wouldn't expect coming from us, but I think it's an important caveat that we make right now. Online church isn't for everyone, right? Not all churches are called to be online. In the same way that not every church is called to be in Atlanta, and not every church is called to be in Grand Rapids, right? There are some churches that were built to be able to take advantage of these and some that were not. But in the same way that online church isn't for everyone, in-person church isn't either, right? I think of someone like my dad. My dad is a social butterfly on crack, right? I knew that when I was growing up and the pastor was done preaching, that was just halftime for the amount of time I would be spending in the lobby as my dad greeted half a dozen people I have never seen before and prayed with them about things I never thought they would reveal to a complete stranger, right? And that was just the way he is. That's the way he interacts with the body, face to face. He likes to hug people. He likes to pray with people. He likes to see them, look them in their eyes when he's interacting with them, right? That's how he interacts with the body. And I'm never going to tell my dad that online church has to be good enough for him, right? That wouldn't be right. That's not how he interacts with the body. However, I have a friend whose name will be changed to protect the innocent or whatever, right? He lives in Wisconsin. He's a programmer, he's a developer, right? He has a lot of friends. He has hobbies, interests that he does all the time. I talk with him almost every day, but he does almost all of that online. That's how he interacts with the world, right? He's one of those 25% of millennials that are spending 10 hours or more on the internet, right? He interacts with the world online almost exclusively. And in the same way that I'm never going to tell my dad that online church has to be good enough for him, I'm never going to tell my friend that he should have to come into a building to get the fullness of what God has for him, right? And I think a lot of churches, unfortunately, inadvertently, are saying exactly that, right? We've created, in a lot of ways, a part of a church online, but there are a lot of parts of what a church is capable of doing that is not currently translated already to the internet, right? So how do we think through this? How do we fix this issue? How many have heard sermons before about how the church isn't a building, right? It's a pretty common sermon. I've definitely heard half a dozen of them, right? Well, in the same way that your church isn't a building, your online church isn't a live stream, right? The live stream is the place that people gather, in the same way that your building is the place where people gather, right? But your online church are the people. And then I would say that we have created church services online. We have moved our services online, but I'm hesitant to say that we've moved our churches online. Church services are a super important part of churches, but I'd say they're not all of churches, right? If we imagine someone who came into our church physical building and they snuck in right as the service started and they just absorbed the service and immediately left and never talked with anybody, never attended any events, engaged with greeters or anybody in the congregation, we wouldn't say that they got the fullness of what a church can be. But in a lot of ways, that's the model that we're providing online and then hoping it'll grow, right? Now, the model that we adopted online, the model that we're all using of live streaming our services and calling that an online campus, was necessary for a time, like we talked about, for survival, right? We were trying to continue the ministries of the church over the pandemic and the lockdown and everything, and we were trying to hold on to the congregation that we had, right? I like to imagine it like we piled our congregation into a plane and we flew over and we crash landed in a third world country, and we were just trying to keep the people close to the plane, right? We were just trying to keep them close, keep interacting with them, keeping them in the ecosystem. We were not yet trying to reach the people outside of that space, the people that were native to that area, right? Like Jack Shepherd needed 3 more seasons to talk to the others, right? We needed some time. We were just interact with our own people. The problem is we never adapted the model. We stuck with that model. And because of that, things started to shrink, because if they're not growing, they're stagnating or they're shrinking. We figured out to an extent how to do worship online. I'd say kind of, right? We figured out how to do preaching online, but we didn't figure out how to do discipleship online. We didn't figure out how to do teaching online, and I would argue we certainly haven't figured out how to do evangelism online, right? What we need to do is rethink what online church is supposed to look like, right? Church services are a good start, but there's a lot more needs that need to be met by our online communities if they're gonna get the fullness of what God has for them interacting with the church body, right? The model that we currently know as online church predated COVID, right? There were churches live streaming before 2020, but this might be a little spicy take, but just hold with me here for a second. The primary vehicle, the primary purpose of those live streams prior to 2020 was an advertisement tool, right? It was streaming so that people in your community, in your general area, can get an idea, can get a vibe of the kind of church service that you have and see if that's something that they would then be interested in attending later down the line, right? Well, I'm here to tell you that as long as we treat our online presences as advertisements for the ministry happening in our doors and not extensions of the ministry that's happening in our building, we're never going to make an impact online like we'd like to, right? We need to build entire churches online, not just services, if we're going to meet the needs of the online community. And if we want to make a dent, I feel like that's a really good place to start.
Whew, I feel like everyone just needs to take a quick deep breath. So with me, come on, just... See, that was a lot to process, and we recognize that. But we do hope that you understand the points that we're making and how we're accidentally killing the online church. Thanks to the overinfluence of mega churches, the inability to escape our own echo chambers, and the vast myriad of problems that came out of the 2020 pandemic, Digital ministry has taken quite the beating over the past couple of years. We've seen that doing online digital ministry halfway is not cutting it, right? And the key to digital success is purpose, intentionality, and authenticity. A few times now, we've gotten to talk with Jay Cranda, who's the online pastor at Saddleback Church. And I feel like every time I talk to him, I learn something brand new about online church. He says this quote that I really, really love by him. Technology isn't an age thing, it's a vision thing. If you're gonna embrace digital ministry, whether that takes the form of online church or something else entirely, you have to actively and intentionally adopt it into the core of your church's culture. And the same long-term investment, intentionality, and commitment that you give to your in-person ministry is also necessary for your on-person or your online presence. And he makes a good point. So for those of us that are passionate about growing our online ministry, we talked about our strategies from before. There's a chance you lean traditionalist, which is totally fine. But for those of us that are wanting to pioneer, that are wanting to move into growth, the most important next step that we need to all take is to make sure that our team's visions aligns with our organization's visions. What you do needs to connect to the heart of your organization if it's gonna have any kind of healthy, long-term sustainability or longevity. And once you align with the vision of your organization, you can start to develop a digital roadmap. Digital roadmap is not an idea that's exclusive to us. Rather, today, I just wanna give 3 quick ways you can develop your digital roadmap, 3 quick questions that you should be asking. First, what do you want your digital ministry to look like? Second, what are you going to do to get there? And third, how will you know when it's working? This is a good starting point for developing a digital roadmap. You should expand upon that. You should make it more custom for your experiences in your churches. But that's a good place to start. And then as you develop your own digital roadmap, it'll be easier to tackle the discussions, the issues that we talked about today. While we can't help every single person in this room right now, we got the timer ticking down very quickly, we do want to at least give 3 potential, more specific strategies that are great starting points to get you from where you are to where you want to go. And the first of these strategies is to digitize your mission. According to the experts, we're bombarded with anywhere between 4,000 and 10,000 ads every single day, which is mind-blowing if you think about it. Driving here, you probably saw 5 or 6 or 7 different billboards that you kind of just shut out, but your mind still subconsciously saw them, right? The hard thing is that we're all competing with every other business and company and billboard and creator and social media ad for the exact same space. We're all trying to vie to get into the algorithms that go in front of our audience. We want to be seen by them, but we have massive competition. And our community, especially with our calling, with our pursuit of the Great Commission, our community needs them to meet them in a way that actually matters, more than toothpastes or online dances or the next big award show, right? And if you're here, you've already put in the hard work. Your organization's already put in the hard work of establishing your vision and your mission statement, right? This is the driving force of your organization. So with this step of the digital roadmap, once you align with your organization's vision, the hard work lies in translating that vision or that mission into the digital space. In a way, we have to develop what is essentially a digital hermeneutic, in which we're translating biblical principles and values into the language and the cultures of the spaces that we're occupying. Before we move any further, though, I feel like it's important to say one thing before we get through the rest of these things, and that's that your ministry does not have to be everywhere all at once in order for it to be effective.
Amen.
Thank you, Nick. Appreciate that. Come on. This is an important thing because we've gotten so caught up in the fact that we feel like we gotta be on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and MySpace and GodTube. There's so many things that we're trying to find and pursue, but we don't have to be everywhere all at once, right? I wanna say that just one more time before I move on. For those that are in the back of the room and those that are online, your ministry does not have to be everywhere all at once in order for it to be effective. At the end of the day, you all know this. We got a lot of people that are tired in here. We got a lot of tired content creators. We've already talked to a couple. And at the end of the day, our teams only have a limited amount of resources, God-given resources. And the more you divide and overextend those resources, the less effective each of those individual avenues will be. So when digitizing your mission, begin to ask the question of what is the most effective uses of the resources that you have. Then begin to learn from the people that are most effectively pulling off ministry or production or experiences in those spaces. Caleb loves to argue that there's no such thing as an original idea. I get that right, Caleb?
It's close enough.
All right. But really, though, he does make a good point in that every single creative concept that we have is a combination of our perspective, the content we consume, and the sticky ideas that are all around us. So what that means for our ministries as we create is while we all want to emulate our favorite content, we need to be very careful not to just copy someone who's doing it better. You shouldn't try to be Discount Bethel because you should be learning instead about the callings and giftings that you are explicitly and exclusively equipped to fulfill. So we're not called to just distribute media, distribute content that follow trends, but rather we're invited to translate our message into a brand new language. So I know that's a lot of philosophy and concepts. So let me break down a couple different ideas for you, 3 practical examples of this idea. So the first is to meme the message. Caleb and Nick both go to Grand Rapids First, and they created this meme out of a popular office template at the time. Without hearing the point of the message, you probably get the idea of what Pastor Sam's message was about, with one little meme and a little bit of reference for the office. For someone scrolling on their feed by Grand Rapids First Instagram, this is a super easy thing to just engage and interact with. It's quick. It's as quick as a like. But what the interesting thing is, something as quick as this might make them have the next decision to visit their Instagram. And then from there, they might want to track down the sermon. And then from there, they might just watch the entire service. And at that point, they might just experience and find your church, right? Could something as simple and easily accessible and easily as popular as a meme be an easy way to help your audiences understand your church's most important messages? Another idea is to embrace the format. I'm gonna get out of the way because there's a looping TikTok about Elon Musk, which is super relevant based on yesterday's conversation. But the Washington Post is a news publication based out of Washington, D.C. They hopped on the TikTok in 2019, and you would think something like a popular professional publication like the Washington Post might make something like, I don't know, maybe a talking head news segment or maybe an on-site video, but rather their creative team decided in the middle of the pandemic while they were stuck at home to embrace the creative short-form version or content that TikTok creates. Because of this site, TikTok, a very professional, certified, formal publication site was able to pull back a little bit and access a different audience, making news accessible and easy to understand. Each of their videos are less than 30 seconds, and they talk about a relevant piece of news that someone that's on TikTok can just consume just like that. And the cool thing is that this content is probably reaching younger audiences that would never, ever open a Washington Post article. Instead of posting whole clips to our sermon, or to whole clips of our sermon to our TikToks, which we've seen oftentimes are largely ignored, what if we use this sort of widely accepted low-budget sketch format in order to communicate the points of a message? And then finally, we can continually learn from the masters, the people that are doing the best. During the pandemic, Crossroads Church in Ohio, for example, flipped the standard worship template on its head, basically bringing in elements inspired by TED Talks and inspired by late night shows. They featured content that was inspired by the masters of communication, the masters of public speaking, and thanks to their creative teams, they were able to make the quality of this program highly engaging beyond just the message. Post-pandemic, they, like Caleb was saying, at the opportunity to open back up, they went back to a pretty standard 65-minute template service, right? Worship, message, worship, everything else. But they also created a second piece of content, which is online, which I believe some of our speakers yesterday talked a little bit about. They now offer a 25-minute YouTube-style program featuring multiple segments created exclusively for the people that are only going to be watching online. They understood that their audiences are most likely to engage with content that's made explicitly for them, and they invest their resources in a way that shows it. So in what ways can we best learn from these digital pioneers that are going above and beyond to focus on the online audience exclusively for our own online audiences? Well, this is not an exhaustive list. There's not just 3 people doing a decent job at it. It does show that there are plenty of great creators that are engaging the digital space in an effective and in a unique way. They teach us that the potential for what we create is only limited by how we digitize our mission.
Exactly. So I know our time is starting to tick down, and I know Caleb's next section is very important. I really want to make sure I have space for it, so I'm going to bridge a couple of things for this next part about getting specific. And this strategy, essentially, what we're doing is we want our messages to be specific and our understanding of the audiences that we're reaching. Earlier, I talked about how social media sites sell advertising space to different companies. Those tools can be used by churches as well. You know, the same type of tools that people use to sell Oreos is the same tools that our church sites can use to put the message of Jesus Christ onto someone's social feed. Caleb, Zach, and I, we also have a YouTube channel. We might have mentioned it. Our very first video that we put out, we created a video trying to demystify some of the methods of marketing in the digital space. And we got a rather interesting comment where this gentleman, he disagreed with us. And he told us that marketing really isn't supposed to be in the church, but he had one last comment I thought was very interesting, where he said, in terms of ministry, it always starts with a leaflet. Happy New Year, winky face. I mentioned this because I think it illustrates a really common misconception that churches shouldn't use marketing tools. The fact of the matter is that we've already embraced a lot of tools, specifically tools within the space of mass marketing. Now, if you're not familiar with mass marketing, it is exactly what it sounds like, marketing to the masses. You get a large group of people to hear your message with the hopes that a small segment of it resonate with it and either buy your product or, as we would say in the marketing world, they make a conversion. Now, other ideas of this would be like billboards, you have leaflets, you have flyers, church bulletins. Hopefully we're making the connection now that the church has already embraced these methods. But in 2022, we have some other methods now in the digital space, specifically targeted marketing. Now, targeted marketing, like mass marketing, is essentially exactly what it sounds like. Your marketing is targeted. Instead of reaching a large group of individuals, we're specifically selecting a small group of individuals, hoping that our return on investment is higher. So instead of having a large group with a small segment that makes that conversion, you're having a smaller segment with a larger percentage. So how does targeted marketing happen on the online spaces? If you're not familiar with Facebook ads, these are incredibly, incredibly powerful tools that we can be using. When Caleb and I were working at Grand Rapids First, Caleb recently made the choice to go full-time Blackbar, which is awesome. I'm still there at Grand Rapids First, but while we were there, we developed a marketing campaign where we picked 3 individuals from our congregation, sat them down, had them tell their stories, and then we posted their stories online. One of those individuals was our friend Tito. Tito is a husband. He has kids that go to our church, and his story was specifically about how his kids interacted with God through the ministries at our church. Now, when we posted those stories online, and specifically for Tito, what we did was we directly targeted his neighborhood, so the individuals in his neighborhood who knew who he was would see him and go, oh my gosh, that's Tito, I gotta watch this. We also specifically wanted to reach individuals that were parents of children, specifically young children. Now, we do this because we want to get that message in front of people that will resonate with that message. And these tools are very scarily powerful. You have the power to specifically find people by age, by their gender, where they went to school, where they were born. I mean, as Caleb has joked a couple times, if you wanted to, you could literally find left-handed truckers and put an advertisement right in front of them. Now, if you remember earlier, we had the example I said about the women's quilting retreat. What if we were able to put advertisements directly in front of people, specifically with that example, women who are interested in quilting local to your area? I think our churches would see a higher return on investment for those posts. Now, it doesn't stop there. We can also use these tools not just to promote our events, but also put the gospel in front of somebody. From a certain point of view, I can imagine that there may be still some skepticism about using these tools. It can feel a little bit problematic. But I think it's important for us to understand that these tools are already in use in our churches as well, specifically targeted marketing. There's a reason why we have men's and women's ministries. There's a reason we separate the youth from the adults. There are messages that resonate with certain people that won't resonate with other individuals. So what we need to do as we engage this digital space is continue to use the tools that we already have, but in a digital way.
Awesome. The last technique that we want to talk about is one that we're all very excited about, that we talk to as many churches as we can about, because we really feel like it has the largest potential of impacting the online world, and that's what we call the digital missionary model. The digital missionary model is literally nothing new. It's nothing exciting. I wish it was, because then I could patent it or something, but it's not. It's the same thing that we should have been doing for 2,000 years in person. We're just doing it on the internet. It's essentially teaching our congregations to be able to engage and interact and share the gospel with people on the internet. I think there's an important thing worth saying here, right? If we always view the internet as a battlefield, all we're going to find are fights, right? But if we view the internet as a mission field, you will find the lost. This is a transition in thought that a lot of Christians haven't made yet. And it's a transition in thought that is required if we're going to be able to make an impact and find people online that need to hear Jesus. There are people online that are hurting. There are people online that need to hear the gospel. Arguing them is not going to fix that, right? We need to serve them. We need to show them the love of Jesus in a personal way. And the digital missionary model is exactly that. It's equipping our congregations, teaching them to see the online spaces that they view and they visit every day as opportunities to share the gospel, right? This is a model that we sort of stumbled into, that I personally stumbled into accidentally when I was exploring a new hobby. And it's a story I like to tell because it kind of lays out the points and the steps to becoming a digital missionary that we talk about churches all the time. So I'm going to share the story with you. It's a bit of a weird one, but I think it's interesting. So in late fall of 2019, I got into a hobby. And if you ask these guys, when I get into a hobby, it is never 50%. It is 100%. I hyper-focus like crazy. It doesn't matter what it is, all my time and energy. I dream about the hobby. You can ask my wife, I spend too much money on my hobbies. And this hobby was definitely probably the strangest hobby that I got into. I got into buying Nerf blasters off the shelf and opening them up and taking out the springs and the motors and the batteries and everything like that, and putting in other springs, motors, and batteries that have no reason being inside a children's toy, and closing that back up and putting holes in my drywall, right? The average Nerf gun shoots about 70 feet per second. My high score is about 330 feet per second, right? I don't know if you've ever been hit with a Nerf dart that's going the speed of an airsoft pellet, but it doesn't. You can ask Nick.
Nick probably still has a weld.
It doesn't feel good, but it's a lot of fun to shoot, right? And I was super into this hobby. I bought a 3D printer. I was making commissions for other people that were interested in the guns that I was making, right? Like I said, never 50%. And eventually, as fun as putting holes in my drywall is, you can ask my wife how much fun it was for her, right? I wanted to find other people to play with. And it turns out, after a bit of Googling, in the same way that there are airsoft clubs online, and there's paintball clubs that people get together and play, there are Nerf clubs where other man-children get together and shoot each other with Nerf guns, right? And there's about 50% of you that probably feel like this is the biggest waste of time and energy and money that you've ever heard. And there's the other 50% that sounds like, that sounds incredible, and I would like to do that. You're all correct. It absolutely is a waste of time and energy, but it's a lot of fun, right? And I found a group of people in the West Michigan area that had met online in a Discord group. They were trying to get a Nerf club together to start to have regular games. And I joined that group and just started talking to them. And now we bring it back to the digital missionary model. I had done the first step of becoming a digital missionary. I identified my audience. I just found a group of people that I had something in common with, and I started talking to them, right? That's step 2, identifying with your audience, right? Identify your audience, identify with your audience. I just started talking shop with them, right? I talked about the springs I was putting in the blaster. We talked about the filament we were putting in our 3D printers. I was not posting daily Bible verses into the lobby, right? I was not arguing politics with them. we were just talking about Nerf guns, a hobby that we had an interest in. And this was just weeks and months of spending this time to get to know them, to become a part of the community, to identify with them, right? And it's important that we spend a lot of time on there because the third step requires that we really understand our community. The third step is identifying what our audience needs, right? This does not have to be a spiritual thing. It often rarely is, right? In my case, for the Nerf gun community, they needed two things. They wanted a logo, because their current one was awful, and they needed a place to play a game. Something you may not have thought of. It's probably not a good idea for guys to run around in public parks with things that look like guns and start shooting each other, right? You want a private place to play those games. Fortunately, at the time, I had been a graphic designer for 10 years, and I worked at a church with recreational facilities that they occasionally rent out to community groups and whatnot. In a matter of about a week, I had designed them a new logo and rented out the facility for a game later that year. And all of a sudden, everything exploded. They were so excited, they made me a chairman on their Nerf board, which is apparently a thing that happens. I didn't know that was an option, right? And all of a sudden, these conversations started happening because they found out, they saw the address, looked it up, and they saw it was gonna be at a church, right? And then all of a sudden, these micro conversations, these questions started coming up. Can I come if I wear a leather jacket and ripped jeans, right? I was never confirmed as a child. Will I still be allowed to play? If I get shot and it hurts, can I curse? Or are you gonna kick me out, right? And these are silly little examples, but what was happening is people were all of a sudden naturally, because I had spent the time to become a part of their community, opening up about their perspectives on the gospel, about their perspectives on church, their past experiences at a church, right? All of a sudden, there was an opportunity to have a conversation about things. I didn't go in intending to do that, right? I just wanted to shoot people with my Nerf guns, right? But God used me in that space to make a difference with those people because I just was a Christian around them, right? I was just showing the love of Jesus to them, meeting their needs, again, not spiritual needs, in a practical way, and the gift opened the way to the giver in that capacity, right? What would it look like if we took that model, identify your audience, identify with your audience, and identify what your audience needs, and taught every single one of our congregation members to view the online spaces that they visit every day, the weird little groups that, your pastor's not in. My pastor's not into Nerf guns, right? He couldn't have made that impact. What if we taught them to view those spaces as opportunities and equipped them with the tools necessary to evangelize them properly? There's a lot of evangelism techniques out there. A lot of them online are more likely to end up with you at the bottom of a comment section dog pile than actually changing anybody's minds. I know this works because I've watched it work multiple times since then, right? We've seen churches adopt this, and it's exciting to see the impact that it's having. I believe that if the church at large wants to make an impact online, it can't just be the church staff. It has to be the whole church. It has to be a vision thing from the senior pastor all the way down to the child, and understanding that the online world is an opportunity, not just a place to get in fights with people on the internet. Cool.
Well done. So my pastor at this point would say something like, man, that's like drinking from a fire hose, or how do we land this plane now? But I think about what we talked about, and there's something that we said that really resonated with me personally. When Caleb mentioned, when we built the online church, we didn't build an online church. We built services instead of a church online. And I think we're accidentally killing the church, not because it isn't a space where we can do ministry, but because we're still learning how to do it. And we're gonna keep learning how to do it. And we're gonna make mistakes, and that's okay. That's an okay thing to happen as long as we keep moving forward. Because I really believe that the internet has given us an incredible amount of power to be able to reach people where they are. Like Caleb said, there are nations online, and the only thing we need to be able to cross over their borders is a username and a password, and maybe a VPN, if you know what a VPN is. You know, we have the ability to reach people while they're on their commutes to work, while they're in their living rooms with their families. If you're like me, scrolling TikTok while you're in the bathroom. You know, we have an incredible power to cross geographical boundaries that has been unprecedented in the last 2,000 years, and we're using this power to back up our sermons. The future is bright if we choose to put in the effort. We've heard this quote on our podcast. The harvest is plentiful, but the workers are not online. So later today, we're going to have a breakout session, Q&A. So if anything has resonated with you today and you'd like to hear more from us, we encourage you guys to join us there as well. But at this time, I'd really like to take a moment to thank Tithely, That Church Conference, Justin Dean, Caroline, all you guys who put this on and given us an opportunity to speak today. To our tech crew from 12 Stone, you guys are incredible and you deserve a lot of thanks. Thank you guys.